Welcome back to the Something in the Wilderness podcast. Our goal is to deep dive into each Andrew McMahon song from throughout his career one by one. If you've listened before, welcome back. But if you're new to the show, I want to welcome you too. Good news, this show is made in such a way that you can listen to the episodes in any order you want. Today, we have Kristin joining the podcast to talk about what she finds special about a classic track that still gets a lot of love these days. And shockingly, we haven't discussed a song from this epic album in almost exactly a year. That's really actually hard to believe, but it's true. Kristin, thanks for joining the show today.
Oh, thank you for having me on. I'm so excited to be here and to chat with you about Andrew McMahon and the song, and this is great.
Yeah, we've got a good song on deck from a epic album, and I'm glad to have you here. So why don't you start by telling us just a little bit about yourself?
Sure. My name is Kristin, as you said. I grew up in New Jersey, and I am currently living in Maryland, kind of just south of Baltimore, Maryland. And I'm a pediatric occupational therapist. I work at a school for children diagnosed with autism and behavioral challenges. I'm also a PhD candidate at Towson University and working on my dissertation right now. So,
Wow.
yeah, I'm a busy bee. And
yeah, it sounds like it.
And I'm also very much in like the dog space.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, my primary like social media that I'm most active on is my dog's Instagram account. I have
Cool.
2 rescue hound dogs, and one of them is a therapy dog. I do a lot of work with that, and that actually kind of helped inspire my dissertation work because I'm doing my dissertation on dogs and children with autism. That's kind of
Interesting.
Yeah, that's kind of everything aside from Andrew McMahon related anything that kind of is going on in my life.
So you have a social media for your puppy, for your dogs. That's really cool. We recently got a puppy, and this puppy will not be getting her own social media. She needs to become a good dog before she gets her own social media. We're still in training. We're early yet, so we're working with her. But that's awesome.
Puppies are a lot of work. So
yes, they are. We're learning that. More to come on that, I'm sure. In the midst of all of this, you've got you're a dog mom, and you've got school and work, and you took some time recently and put together a project for the entire Andrew McMahon fan base. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. I have kind of super been getting like back into Andrew McMahon stuff recently. I've been a fan for over 20 years, but kind of with like something corporate kind of reuniting and Andrew releasing his new album, I kind of had like a resurgence of interest. And I had gone to the Andrew McMahon in the Wilderness show in late November. So I was just kind of like really riding a high from that show. And 2 weeks into December, I got COVID. And yeah, and it was right before Christmas break when I was going to have like a week and a half off work. It was right when my semester had ended in my PhD program. So it was like I turned in my final assignment. I had to basically stop working a week early for Christmas break. And to add to that perfect storm, my husband went out of town for a few weeks. So I was alone in my house with nothing to do.
Oh, wow.
Could not go anywhere because I was quarantined. And I was like just sick enough that I was like kind of miserable, but also just like really needed something to do. And I was just like watching a lot of like videos that people had posted online.
I can relate to that.
So like that's kind of how I was spending my free time, just watching a ton of videos. And I was really especially compelled by all the karaoke performance videos. I just like couldn't get enough of them. I thought it was the coolest thing ever. I have no musical talent. And I believe you said that you do karaoke like for fun.
Yeah, definitely just for fun.
I also do. I love karaoke for fun, but I can't really sing. So just seeing all these videos of all these fans getting this opportunity to actually go up on stage and sing with Andrew was the coolest thing. And I could not stop watching them.
Hmm.
And I kept wondering, I'm like, is there a compilation video somewhere that has like clips of all these? Like, is there anywhere where like they all exist online? And I started asking around in all the fan spaces, like the fan Facebook group and the Camp Wilderness online, and
Hmm.
that didn't seem to exist. Like there didn't seem to be any sort of compilation of all the performances, and
Right.
I had all of this spare time. So I decided to just kind of tackle it, and I started asking people to send me any video that they had of any of the karaoke performances from this
Hmm.
last New Friends Andrew McMahon in the Wilderness tour. And I have some like hobby experience video editing, mostly, honestly, for my dog's Instagram account.
Yeah.
I do a lot of like reels and such, and I kind of learned video editing. And my brother does video editing as part of like his job. So I
Hmm.
know a few tricks from him. And I'm like, let me just try this. So I actually had to work quite hard to track down
Yeah.
all of these videos. I kind of felt like I was like borderline harassing the community.
It's a lot to pull together.
It was, but I managed to get clips of every single karaoke performance from the tour, and
Wow.
yeah, and I edited it all together. So I tried to do about like 30 to 40 seconds of each karaoke song, and I
Hmm.
combined them all together into one video to upload to YouTube and share with everyone in the community. And it was really a lot of fun. And it gave me something to do with my kind of 2 weeks of isolation and boredom. So it was a great project.
I loved it, firstly, from a personal standpoint, but also I saw a lot of positive feedback from the fan community. And that's why I called it at the top of this conversation. That's why I call it kind of a gift to the fans, or like a project for the fans, because I really see that as a service that you did, putting all that together, not only for the people who sang, but also just like everybody that was interested in watching live videos. Like now I have a place I can go and watch, like I think it's a 16-minute video of every karaoke performance from the New Friends tour, and it kind of gives you get to see every venue stage, you get to see every performer, you get to see Andrew and the band and the rest of the guys in the band for a little bit of the song on every tour. So it's kind of a neat thing that you put together, and as just a hobby video editor, you did a really good job. I was really impressed.
Well, thank you. It was fun to do, and I felt if I was enjoying watching this sort of thing so much that there was probably
Hmm.
other fans out there who would enjoy it. And
Oh yeah.
yeah, it was such a cool thing that Andrew had done for the tour, and I just felt like, yeah, it should be kind of commemorated, and I had the time and interest to do it.
Hmm.
So, yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Thank you for that, and I'm sure a lot of people feel that same way. So you said that you recently kind of came back around to the fan base with the Something Corporate Union, with the New Friends tour, with the new album early last year. Can you elaborate on that a little bit more? Like where did your Andrew McMahon fan story start, and how did it come back around to this?
I want to say, I'm pretty sure it was my junior year of high school, which would have
Mm-hmm.
been fall of 2002 to spring of 2003.
Mm-hmm.
As I said, I have no musical talent, but I've always had friends that have a lot of musical talent. So my high school had this coffee house style talent show,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of like acoustic guitar, piano songs, poetry, etc. And a lot of my friends were in it. And my friend Dave, he played an abbreviated version of Constantine and sang
Wow.
on the piano. And it blew me away. And I was like, Dave, what was that song? It was so good. And he's like, oh, it's Something Corporate. And I had heard of the band. I was a big like Newfound Glory fan at the time, and
Mm-hmm.
Something Corporate and Newfound Glory had just toured together. I didn't go to that tour, but I had like heard the name and connection, but
Mm-hmm.
I hadn't really dug into their music. And after the talent show, Dave pulled out, his original iPod the size of a brick He had three versions of Constantine, the Ready Break version, and then there was like
Mm-hmm.
a Welcome to the Family Drive-Through Records version, and then there was
Yep.
like another random live version that he had found, off of LimeWire, and he like was like, okay, now listen to this version. Now listen to this version, and I'm like, oh my God, this is so good. Like, what else do they sing? He kind of helped me download everything off of LimeWire. It was, the time like right before North. So like
Mm-hmm.
Audio Boxer, Leaving Through the Window, all the like unreleased songs and like
Yep.
Galaxy sessions, and got
Oh yeah.
really into something corporate at that time. So like yeah, like my junior, senior year of high school, freshman year of college, and then they kind of broke up. Jack's Mannequin formed, got really into Jack's Mannequin,
Mm-hmm.
and then I guess I just kind of like moved on a little bit from it after The Glass Passenger.
Okay.
I had moved on to other things. It was like after I had graduated college, and which is kind of in a different phase of my life. I actually didn't even know people had and things had existed until like years later.
Unfortunately, I think there's a lot of people that didn't know about that.
Yeah, it's such a good album. Like I kind of
It
like
is.
rediscovered it as an adult, and yeah, I'm kind of upset I didn't know about it at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of got into a kick when Something Corporate had their reunion tour. And then I just kind of like fell off again. I was
Yeah.
aware of Andrew McMahon in the Wilderness. I did
Mm-hmm.
check out the first album and really liked it. And then life got busy, and I just like
Mm-hmm.
missed Zombies on Broadway and Upside Down Flowers. Like, didn't know they existed until a little later either, which that time of my life was really busy. I was moving to Maryland, training for a triathlon, planning my wedding, getting married. So that like 2017, 2018, I'm not
Yeah.
surprised I had no idea. So it was during the 2020 pandemic that I even rediscovered that he was still making music.
Okay.
So I had from like 2014 or so until 2020.
Yeah. Was it the live streams that brought you back, or what was it in 2020 that made you start listening again?
Yeah, it was the live streams. Like anyone who was like putting out content and like music and such during the
Yeah.
quarantine really like caught my attention. One of my friends who was like a, something corporate Jack's Mannequin, Andrew friend, had posted about that Andrew McMahon was like doing all this stuff. I'm like, Andrew McMahon, really? Okay, yeah. And so I tuned in for some of the live streams and kind
Mm-hmm.
of got back into it. And then when he released the Tilt at the Wind album, I really,
Jump back
yeah,
in.
jumped back in.
The song we're talking about today, so we've talked a little bit about Jack's Mannequin and a lot about Something Corporate and a lot about Andrew McMahon in the Wilderness. But ironically, we're going to talk a lot more about Jack's Mannequin, I think, as we talk through this song. The song we're talking about today was one of the standout tracks on this album when I first heard it. And I think it had something to do with being on the front of the album, but also, let's face it, it's a catchy song with relatable lyrics, it's heartfelt, it's passionate, it's meaningful to a lot of people, including myself. But I gotta say, over time in the last 15 years, other tracks on this album that we're going to talk about have kind of risen up around the song we're going to talk about. And that's not a dig at it, that's not a negative about it. I love this song, but for whatever reason, I feel like kind of like a radio single that you've heard a lot and in a lot of contexts and you've heard it a lot live, then you start tending toward the deep cuts and something that feels fresh to you. And let's face it, it's really hard to rank songs on a perfect album, which is what I think this is. So today we're talking about the song Bruised. It's by Jack's Mannequin. It was track 3 on Everything in Transit. Everything in Transit was released on August 23rd, 2005. Kristin, I have my own reasons, and I'll get into that as the episode goes on. But what was it about this song? When we started chatting on Instagram, you said the song you want to talk about was Bruised.
I think for me, this song just kind of continuously reinvents itself for me, and I
Mm-hmm.
keep coming back to it. It kind of just keeps finding other meanings for me as time goes. It's so like multi-layered for me, and it just seems to continuously apply to like different situations in life because there's kind of like the literal words of the song. And then there's like being on a plane is kind of like the ultimate liminal space. You're transitioning from one thing to another, and it's that space
Mm-hmm.
in between, and you have absolutely no control over it. He uses being on the plane as like such a great metaphor,
Yeah.
especially the days before Wi-Fi. There's nothing you can do. You can't control how the plane is going. You can't control the
Mm-hmm.
route you're taking. You can't control how long it is. You can't control the other people on the plane, and you're just there. You're alone in your thoughts, and
Yeah. You're isolated. You couldn't even communicate with people off outside of the plane back then.
right. And there's a world that just it's continuing outside of the plane, but like while you're in that plane, you're there in that plane, in that like liminal space, kind of stuck between two things, and you just have to think about it, really. And that is a feeling that I have continued to relate to throughout my life,
Mm-hmm.
particularly right after it first came out. The Everything in Transit album in general, it came out the beginning of my sophomore year in college.
Mm-hmm.
And second semester, sophomore year, I did a semester abroad in London. And that was kind of the soundtrack of that time of my life.
Yeah.
And I was on the plane going to London, and I was so excited, but I also was having like massive FOMO about, missing out on a semester that all my friends, I was gonna lose touch with all my friends. They were gonna do all these things without me. My family was
Mm-hmm.
gonna do all these things without me. And I didn't know what was going to happen when the plane landed. I knew that it was going to be exciting, but I was on a literal plane going through all
Yeah.
these thoughts and listening to this album, and Bruised comes on, and it just spoke to me in a literal and figurative sense, and
Oh,
just
yeah.
connected so much to my thought process at the time. And that whole album continued to be very important to me during that semester for me, that ended up being a very transformative time of my life. And it just, that song in particular continues to kind of be relevant in different ways for me.
If you're like me and you have a soundtrack to your life, this song sounds like it's probably on there.
Yes.
If not physically on there, maybe in your mind it's on there.
Yes, absolutely. And I would put it right as like the London era of my life.
Yeah.
It would be
Yeah.
this song would kind of encapsulate that feeling, and also just actually listening to it a lot when I was there.
Along with what I said about the song earlier, and I'll go into more detail in a bit, this song could also be on the soundtrack to my life because it definitely reminds me of a certain era. And I think that's why it was more special to me in 2005 than it is in 2006 even, than it is to me now, because it was a very specific moment in time. Fun fact, this song, among others from Everything in Transit, it leaked early on the internet, which I just found out recently. So sometimes I find these little nuggets of information out online. And I was looking through Andrew's blog posts from 2005, early 2005, and somebody commented on one of his blog posts, and they said, "Hey, Andrew, just so you know, your album has leaked online. Like, I've already heard Bruised and Miss Delaney."
Wow.
Yeah, that's kind of weird. Like, I didn't know any of that was going on back then, of
Me
course. I wasn't
neither.
that savvy. I wasn't online, like, digging for Jack's Mannequin or something corporate stuff that year. I knew when the album came out, but I didn't know any of the pre-stuff leading up to it. Like, they did a little bit of a tour leading up to it and were playing songs like this before they even released an album, before he found out he was sick. And then there was these blog posts all spring and summer. And I just happened to find that on there. So, but this song's also featured on a few compilations, which we'll get into. It was on the soundtrack to the movie Snakes on a Plane. Have you ever seen that movie?
No, I'm very aware of the movie. I could even quote it, like mother effing
Yeah.
snakes on this mother effing plane. But I completely missed ever seeing that movie. I don't know how. It's just like one of those, like, I don't like snakes. So I am not like,
Well, then you would not like this
I
movie,
did
trust
not
me.
seek it out. So I had no idea that Bruised was in that movie until I saw your outline. I was like, why did he put Snakes on a Plane here? And I looked it up. I'm like, oh.
To me, it's ironic that it's on that soundtrack. So I have a theory about that soundtrack, and it's a very simple and basic theory. Basically, that soundtrack was just used as a promotional tool for like pop punk music at the time. Cobra Starship did. They got them to do the song "Bring It," Snakes on a Plane, and I don't know if the song was written for it or inspired by it or what, but it's kind of a silly song. But then you have Bruised. That's not a silly song whatsoever. So, like you, I completely missed Snakes on a Plane back then, but I was very aware it existed. And just like you, I could quote it, even though I'd never seen it, because I'd seen that trailer and people were saying the lines. And even though it wasn't like, I'm sure nobody was saying it was a great movie, it was just one of those that like, it was funny that it even existed, I guess.
Yeah.
Just the whole concept of it, right? So I did some deep research this past week, and I actually watched the movie. And I can't believe I watched the movie just for this, but I wanted to know if and when Bruised was played in the movie. And guess what? It's not in the movie at all.
Oh, it's not. Okay.
Not surprising
Okay.
either. Like
So
I
it's
said,
just
so
on the soundtrack, not in
it's
the
just on the
actual- okay.
soundtrack. The only songs on that in the actual movie that I could pick out in terms of like being a song that wasn't just a score, where there's a song in the very beginning that's not a pop punk song at all. And then there's a song by Cobra Starship that I mentioned in the end credits. And then there's another song after that in the end credits that I couldn't identify and I didn't bother with it. But there's like 15 songs on that soundtrack. I know a lot of the artists. I can't recall them at this moment, most of which are not in the movie anywhere. And I always wondered, though, before I saw this movie, I'm like, how does Jack's Mannequin's Bruised fit into this movie? Because he says that he's getting on a plane. I think that's it.
Probably, like, if it's not actually in it, it's probably because it's about a plane.
Yeah.
It takes place on a plane, so
Right.
yeah,
Right.
that's probably why.
If you get on Spotify and if anybody chooses to look it up, you can find the Snakes on a Plane soundtrack, but Bruised is actually grayed out. It's Bruised, quote, remix. I don't know what the remix is, but if I've heard it, I may have heard it in the past. I can't hear it anymore. It's not on YouTube that I can find. You can't get it on Spotify.
Now I need to find this. Now that like you're saying this, I feel like I might,
because other songs on the
I might
soundtrack
go down
are
a
on
rabbit.
Spotify. I didn't go too deep, but I figured I spent the 90 minutes watching the movie, so it was fun. Actually, I wouldn't recommend the movie to anybody, but it was a fun watch, and I'm glad I finally saw it. It was one of those movies that has been like sitting in my brain for over 15 years, and I was like, I gotta see that movie at some point. I kind of like goofy, cheesy horror, action, comedy movies, so that seems in my lane, and it kind of was in my lane. So, but again, not the type of movie I'm probably gonna recommend to most people, especially if you don't like snakes.
I feel like it's like a very like one of those movies that like I don't know, it's probably not a good movie. Like it doesn't look like a good movie, but it was like kind of a cultural phenomenon, like you said. Like
Yeah.
I think just the fact that it existed entertained people so much because I remember when I first saw the trailer, I as well as other people thought it was fake. Like thought it was like a joke.
And why
It
would
wasn't.
Samuel L. Jackson be in this movie? How is this famous actor? I mean, he's huge now, but he was huge at the time. Why is he in this movie, this ridiculous movie? But I guess he also did Deep Blue Sea. So
Maybe one day I'll watch it just to say I did.
serious song, not at all a serious movie. I don't know how this fits except for the plane reference. So just a couple of notes here. So the song was written by Andrew McMahon. Andrew and Jim Wirt produced the album version along with the rest of Everything in Transit. And we have Andrew on piano and vocals, Jim Wirt on bass guitar, a Robert Raw Anderson on guitar, but we all know him as Bobby nowadays, Patrick Warren on the Chamberlin, which is an electromechanical keyboard, and Tommy Lee of Motley Crue on the drums, which, as long as I've known that, 18 years or whatever, it still baffles me that the drummer of Motley Crue did the drumming on a lot of these tracks. But CJ Erickson did the programming because there's some program beats or drums on the track as well. Kristin, Andrew was asked in an Absolute Punk interview 6 days after this album came out back in 2005 what his favorite songs that he's ever recorded are. I'm going to give you some hints, some I think pretty good hints here. The first song was a Something Corporate song. From Leaving Through the Window.
Hmm.
And I think, off the top of my head, I think it's the first song that we ever heard Andrew reference space in.
Hmm. From Leaving Through the Window.
Middle of the album.
Why am I drawing a blank?
Who Goes to Space?
Oh, The Astronaut.
Yeah, the
That was
astronaut.
one of his
So
favorite songs he ever recorded.
at the time, I thought that was really interesting. Like, that is not one of them he references nowadays as his favorites, but
Yeah, I feel like that's not even a song that he plays anymore.
not a whole lot. They played it at the reunion, some of the reunion shows
Okay.
this past year, but which I was actually surprised by because you're right. It's not one that you hear a lot. The other song, well, a very familiar song from Everything in Transit, and it's very relevant to our topic today.
Is it Bruised?
It is. So again, I found that really surprising that less than a week after the album came out, they were asking him what his favorite songs he ever wrote were,
Huh.
and Bruised was one of them. Yeah, the astronaut was a little shocker too.
Yeah, that surprises me, honestly. I wouldn't have guessed that.
Yeah, those are not two songs because I've listened to a lot of interviews, read a lot of interviews where they ask him his favorite songs or ones that are really special to him or whatever. And these days I hear Watch the Sky, which I talked about in the last episode, and I hear Sicilian the Satellite, and I hear, of course, a lot of more modern Andrew McMahon songs. But back then it was just one Jack's album and a couple of something corporate albums. So there wasn't nearly as much to dig through, but still surprising to me.
Yeah, that is an interesting fun fact.
Let's talk about a little bit of live history here. So, according to Setlist FM, the song's been played live a grand total of 391 times, 211 by Jack's Mannequin, 62 by Andrew solo, and 119 by Andrew McMahon in the Wilderness. Now, if you look at the numbers of all the songs that he plays live nowadays off of Setlist FM, that's actually a pretty high number. Most recently, it was just played last month at the St. Petersburg show, where fans apparently froze on the beach in Florida. Did you hear about that?
I heard about that. Yeah,
I have some
heard
friends that were
people.
there. It was
Okay.
40 degrees.
Oh, that is really cold for Florida. Like I heard people referencing
It
like
is.
being cold and whatever. I'm like, but isn't it in Florida? And someone was like, yeah, but there was like
One would
a
think.
cold spell. I feel like Florida cold is a whole different animal.
I don't know, even coming from 40 degrees in Ohio, 60 degrees in Florida feels very cold. I don't know why.
No, you're right.
I feel badly for the people who were down in Florida, went down to Florida for that show and had to sit and stand. You know, you'd think outdoor show in Florida, apparently in January, they assumed it would be warm enough, but it was not. Are you surprised by how many times the song's been played live?
I do feel like it is kind of a fan favorite, and I think
Hmm.
it's one that translates really well live. You know, like kind of when he gets to the bridge, he kind of usually gets up off the piano and he's kind of like waving his arms and dancing
Yep.
around. Like, I just think it is a song that kind of really does translate well live. So I'm not shocked. Like, that's a lot of times.
Hmm.
Yeah, it doesn't shock me that he kind of goes to that one a lot.
I've seen this song performed live several times, but I looked back in my 2023 concert history just to be sure, and he didn't play it once last year. But that to me is not surprising because I think he played it for almost every show on the 2022 Hello Gone Days tour. In fact, I know he played it on some of the New Friends dates, but he didn't play it on the one I saw, nor did he play it earlier in the year when I saw him either. But at the Hello Gone Days tour, I think he opened with it most of those dates, and I saw that tour twice. And I have a maybe not a popular opinion, but I didn't feel like it was a great opening song. I like hearing that song live, but I think I like it better in the middle of the set somewhere. And I don't know why, because like I understand why it would be an opening song. It has a build, like it starts off slow. It kind of has like this epic opening, and then it leads into this, chorus with a beat and, gets people moving. So, but I don't know why. I feel like there's some songs that when artists open with them, I'm not ready for them yet. And I felt that way about Bruised. Is that weird?
No, that's not weird. I understand what you're saying. I also can't quite articulate it, but that makes sense
Hmm.
what you're saying. That yeah, it's not quite as grabby as like an opening song.
Hmm.
I don't know. He opened my new friends show that I went to. Well, he opened all of them with the Nobody Tells You When You're Young, but like
Yeah.
the walking through the crowd thing, but like the on stage opening song was Mixtape. And
Yeah, that's what I saw too.
I think that works really well as an opening
Yes.
song. I think it's like so
Especially the
grabby.
transition from
Yeah.
that really slow song walking through the crowd to like the jump off the piano mixtape song. Like
Yeah. I
that's
think
a good opener.
yeah, I think it's very grabby. Like even if
Hmm.
you aren't even an Andrew McMahon fan, I feel like that as an opening song would kind of like just get you ready to go. I think yeah, Bruce, it's just a little more of like a nuanced song that yeah, I think you kind of want to be like warmed up for a little bit.
I'm glad I'm not like completely out of left field on that one.
No, I agree with you. Unfortunately, yeah, I didn't get Bruised at my new friends
Oh, you
show
didn't?
that I went
Oh,
to.
see,
No.
I was thinking that might have been part of the reason that you picked that song. So okay, so I was mistaken. You didn't get bruised.
No, I am not disappointed in my set list at all. I only went to one of the shows.
Hmm.
I hope to be like you and some of the other fans one day and like travel around to multiple shows on a single tour, but that's not typically my style. I feel very lucky if I have time to, make one show.
Understandably.
I am not disappointed in my set list at all. I had a great set list.
Hmm.
I saw the show in Baltimore and we got, I believe it was the tour debut, but I also believe the only time on the tour that he played MFEO, Made for Each Other, parts
All
one
right.
and two.
Oh.
Yeah, and he kind of like did a little speech right before it, and he's like, halfway through the tour, I think I want to shake things up a little bit.
Hmm.
Someone asked for it, so why the hell not? Let's go. And
Yeah.
played Made for Each Other, and then I was like looking at the other set lists afterwards, and I never saw it appear again. So I could be wrong about that, but I think we got the only MFEO on the tour, so I have no complaints, but I would have liked to see Bruised.
But it sounds like you got a great one in kind of in place of it.
Yeah, I'm okay
I
with it. And I have seen
Yeah.
Bruised live before. I saw
Hmm.
Jack's Mannequin in 2009, I believe. And I do know it was definitely on the set list
Hmm.
then. So it's okay. It's okay that I didn't see it this year. Or
I'm pretty sure Bruised was at least one, if not more, of the karaoke songs in some of the
yeah,
dates.
so
Okay.
that I
Maybe that's what
did
I was thinking.
so a lot more than one. There was,
Okay.
I believe, five of
Oh,
that.
interesting.
In the time I spent making the video, I spent a lot of time watching the live versions of that song. Yeah, that was one that he did as a karaoke song frequently. So the songs that had multiple people that did them, I like did different parts of the song as their clip. And so that was actually one song that with the different karaoke people, I was able to actually like make basically the whole song. So I did like one karaoke singer for like one verse, another one for like the first chorus, another one for the second verse, another one for the bridge. And so I spent a lot of time watching other live performances
So,
for
so
new
you kind
friends.
of did
So
see it live in a way.
I did not like in person,
Not live,
but
live, but
I spent a lot of
yeah.
time with the live performances of it. So that's okay.
Well, sounds like I need to watch the video again. I watched it back in December a couple of times when you first released it. Do you know how many there were? Do you have a offhand number or
Uh,
estimate?
I want to, it was over 30, I think.
So that's impressive right there. Well, this is ironic. You said you're from New Jersey originally, right?
Yes.
I found a recording of Bruised from the New Jersey Hello Gone Days tour that I'll include in the show notes. So I don't know if he played it this past time. I don't even know if he played in New Jersey this tour, but he did play this song at a New Jersey venue back in 2022. So that's the video that I thought was good to post. I'll post that in the show notes, but of course I'm also going to post your video in the show notes out. So anybody who hasn't checked it out definitely needs to. Andrew also played this song on Instagram Live. You may or may not remember that, but back in March 2020, that was one of the songs of many that he played in those live streams. And I don't necessarily remember specifically him playing that, but I will link that one in the show notes too.
I am very upset that I didn't get to as a complete aside, I'm very upset that I did not get to go to the Hello Gone Days tour because Dashboard is like my other like all-time favorite since high school. And the fact that they played and toured together and I didn't go is very sad to me, and I don't even remember why I didn't go. I think it was like just timing, like the timing of
Hmm.
whatever I had going on. I believe the show in Baltimore was like on a weeknight, and I don't even remember what it was, but I kind of wish I had prioritized and maybe traveled or figured out how to go because that's really sad. And you sent me the performance from New Jersey and I watched
Hmm.
it and it was at the Stone Pony and I've been to shows at the Stone Pony
Hmm.
before and I got like retrospective FOMO that I did not make a tour date for Hello Days. So
I think it happens to all of us because there was a period of time when my kids were young, like 2011 until, I don't know, almost the pandemic, where I didn't go to that many concerts actually. So I can completely relate to that. But you got to go to new friends,
I
and there will be
did.
future shows. There'll be shows in the future you get to go to. So let's talk songwriting just a little bit.
Yep.
Have you ever heard on Spotify, there's a collection of 23 tracks called The Best of Andrew McMahon, track by track?
No, I am not.
If you search out Andrew McMahon or Andrew McMahon in the Wilderness on Spotify and you scroll down far enough, there's a track by track and it's him talking for like 40 to 50 seconds on 23 different songs, and one of them is Bruised.
Oh, I need to find this.
Yeah, what I'm about to share with you is from that. Something he said in that commentary was, it's a breakup song set to the backdrop of a vacation gone awry. Then he goes on to say it's about a couple going away for a weekend when they maybe should have been separated. So it's about that final airplane ride home when you both know you're going home to a breakup. And I can actually sort of kind of relate to that. He also added that it's a heartbreaking song, but what he appreciates about the song is that the majority of it is up-tempo, and it's balanced out. That up-tempo beat balances out the heaviness of the lyrics. So, and I completely agree with it because at times of the song, I can almost call it a ballad. I
Mm.
mean, sort of, kind of. But when you get to the chorus and you have that beat and it's kind of moving, it's more like a rock song. It doesn't really feel like a ballad. So I get what he's saying there. We can easily assume this is about his breakup with Kelly because the timing of the breakup was during the Everything in Transit era as he was writing these songs. Again, I personally wasn't following that whole story back then. Like, I had no idea. This was all like many, many years later. I knew that he had this girlfriend that he broke up with, and then they later got married. Did you know any of that was going on at the time when you were a hardcore Jack's Mannequin fan?
No, like you said, like now I know their whole story and
Mm-hmm.
the happy ending and kind of the
Yeah.
that they were like on and off during that time. But no, at the time I was not really following his personal life as into kind of something corporate and Jack's Mannequin as I was. I knew about his cancer. I
Mm-hmm.
was kind of very invested in that. A bunch of my friends and we like all like wrote letters to him about like how much his
Oh,
music
cool.
meant to us and kind of compiled them and like sent them to him like during his cancer recovery. Like I knew that about his personal life, but
Mm-hmm.
in terms of like his relationships and stuff, I did not. I didn't know Kelly's name. Yeah, like you, all that kind of
Yeah.
came later.
Right. All I knew was what was in the lyrics of the music. That's all I knew, and I
Yeah,
and I
same.
interpreted that in terms of my own life. And speaking of which, the whole theme of this song is very relatable for me because I heard the song obviously with everybody else that heard it when it first came out in 2005. But when I heard the song, I'd already had this experience prior to that felt very similar. So when I heard the song, I thought of this moment in my life. Back in January 2004, I was dating this girl, and we both lived in Michigan, and she was finishing up her grad program at the University of Michigan while I was moving to Hawaii. But it was one of those situations where we started dating like 6 months before I was moving. I knew I was moving, but we were like, you know what, it happens. Like, yeah, but this feels right, so we're just gonna date. And knowing that I was moving across the world. But we decided to stay together, but we drove across the country to Los Angeles in my car. And then at the airport, I was getting on a plane in LA to Honolulu. She was getting on a plane to go back to Detroit. And it was one of those moments, and it was that way for a while, like, are we breaking up? Is this happening? Are we going to stay together? We ended up staying together for a while, but it was just kind of a weird moment. This song is kind of tied to that for me, for better or
Okay.
for worse. It reminds me of that moment in time, so it could technically be a part of my life soundtrack. Now, to kind of continue that story, actually, a little bit later on, we had a similar moment, and this time it went differently. We moved to Maryland together, out of Michigan, and we both got jobs down there, and we both had our own separate lives. But we did actually break up at that point. We went our separate ways. And this song is kind of tied to those years for me, not knowing, is this the end? That moment where, like, do I choose loneliness or do I stay with somebody that maybe I don't belong with? And I finally admitted that I was wasting her time, and maybe that's why I don't feel like I have the direct personal connection to it that I do with some other Andrew songs now. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it absolutely does. And there are songs like that for me. Well, it's interesting because Bruised is absolutely a breakup song, but
Mm-hmm.
I hear a lot of like other things in it as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's obviously about a romantic relationship breakup, but I don't know. I feel like when he wrote all of Everything in Transit and including that song, he was also breaking up with the band, like with something corporate. So he was,
Yeah.
writing
Oh, he
and
was.
recording Everything in Transit with Jack's Mannequin as he was kind of taking an indefinite hiatus from something corporate. And he was also breaking up with Kelly. And I think that kind of whole mindset that he was in, I think works its way into a lot of the songwriting in Everything in Transit. And I hear a lot of that in Bruised as well. Just kind of this general indecision of like, he's making all these choices. He's, forming a different band, kind of leaving behind the comfort of something corporate. He's breaking up with Kelly and kind of he obviously loves her and obviously he's really struggling with that decision, but at the time he feels like it's the right one, but he doesn't know. Like he's just in this, transitory space where he's just like really contemplating like am I making the right decision here? I'm leaving my band, I'm leaving my girlfriend like and I kind of hold on to that a little more, even though it's obviously a breakup song, but there are other
Mm-hmm. No, you
songs.
make a really good point.
But there are definitely other Jack's Mannequin and Something Corporate songs that are more tied to a specific breakup of mine that like I was listening to while processing a breakup that like you, like I'm not as almost 20 years later not as connected to the song because I was so connected to it in a situation with a person that
Mm-hmm.
I
You
am
get
no
it. You
longer
get me.
with. For me, I would say the song Rescued off of the same album. I was listening to that and relating it to a breakup at the time,
Okay.
and I can't listen to that song. Like, I still love the song, it's a great
Yeah.
song, but it always takes me back to like that breakup. Even though it's on the same album, I was in the same mindset.
Mm-hmm.
Rescued kind of spoke to like that breakup to me, whereas Bruise has just kind of found its way to have other meanings for me. So,
I completely get what you're saying because I'm the opposite. So rescued
okay.
means something different to me, even though it very easily could feel like a breakup. And again, it was that same. I was listening to that same album those years, 2005, 2006, when all that was happening. But rescued has come to mean something so much different to me. And coincidentally, that's the song. That's the last song I talked about on Everything in Transit. It was a year ago this month. Anybody that hasn't heard that episode, go check that one out. Yeah, so I think that's what it is with me. It's not like a hang up with Bruised, like I don't like it because it reminds me of that relationship, because it wasn't like a negative ending or anything like that. It was just like it was so much of that moment. So let's talk a little bit about the sound of the song before
Sure.
we get into lyrics. Going back to an earlier point, I understand again why this could have been an opener in concert, so I won't dwell on that too much with the slow build and then a lot of energy in the chorus. I feel like it belongs where it is on the track list. Like the sound of it fits really well between the mixtape and I'm Ready. And those are two kind of like bangers, if you will, like rock songs, like a lot of energy. And this kind of balances that mood a little bit with the slower verses, but the energy in the middle there. I would consider this kind of like a mid-tempo song. Like I said earlier, You could almost call it a ballad if it didn't have all of that energy in the chorus, in my opinion. But it kind of toes that line. What does this song feel like to you? How does a song feel to you?
I think you kind of nailed how I would have probably described it as well. I like the tempo changes in it. I that
Mm-hmm.
that build is it's very interesting
Mm-hmm.
musically. How yeah, you kind of have that like really ballady parts, and then it kind of becomes a party when you get
Yeah.
to the chorus, not the chorus, the bridge.
Yeah. Like I said, I mentioned earlier, so Tommy Lee plays drums on the track, but there's also some programmed drums on there. But I don't think that was too uncommon on that album. There's programming on a lot of it. Let's talk about lyrics.
Okay.
I found it's hard, and you brought it up earlier. I found it's really difficult to talk about this era of Andrew's music, from Everything in Transit, of course, Glass Passenger for the obvious reasons, without mentioning his cancer diagnosis, treatment, and recovery. Have you ever heard kind of the reference, though? It's interesting that Andrew wrote this album before he knew he was sick, and he recorded it before he knew he was sick. But there's things in the lyrics on this album that kind of make you think, like, after the fact. And I remember questioning it. So when I found out, I was like, oh, and I think I assumed at a point in my fandom back in, the mid 2000s that he talks about a hospital in one of the songs, and he talks about being bruised. Did you think that at the time, or did you know that the whole thing was separate?
I'm not sure if I knew at the time or not that like because by the time the album came out, everyone knew about his cancer diagnosis. So I think
Yeah.
I did probably assume that
Mm-hmm.
he knew about the diagnosis when he was writing it, but I did find out later on at least that he recorded the album before he knew he was sick, and
Yeah.
it is kind of eerie
Yeah,
listening
it
to these
is.
songs, knowing that he was just about to be diagnosed with cancer and had no idea because, yeah, those references are very almost this like clairvoyant. You wonder if, like, on some level, he knew. He just
Mm-hmm.
didn't cognitively know. Like his
Yeah.
body felt off, but it's one of those like cosmically strange things that he wrote all of these lyrics and he was like writing this album. And then I think it was the day he finished recording that he got his cancer diagnosis or something like that.
Yeah. Something like
Again, I
that.
didn't know
Yeah.
that at the time. That's something I like learned later
Right.
on. And that, yeah, he was like just about to be diagnosed with cancer and go through all the treatment, but he wasn't. I don't know. It's almost like his lyrics almost tell the future in a way. And I think that is the most interesting thing almost about a lot of these lyrics, that he didn't know that he was about to be sick.
Yeah, the whole timing of this album, and he didn't know, but yet there's these lyrics in here, and that whole thing when he says every inch of me is bruised, we can mostly assume that that's like he's talking mentally. He just felt beaten up. He just felt like he was in a bad spot, that sort of thing. So he wasn't talking about the cancer, obviously. Are there any specific lyrics that you relate to or that stick out to you?
It is interesting because, yeah, I will like hold on to different lyrics and like different
Mm-hmm.
parts of my life and like different things that I'm going through, which is why I think I did want to talk about this song because it just does kind of renew itself for me. And whatever he was originally writing about and whatever I was originally connecting to at the time I was listening to it has kind of transformed. So, yeah, I definitely connect to a lot of it. I think one particular lyric that I really like, and I don't even so much necessarily connect to it now, but sometimes perfection can be perfect hell.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, there's just something about that like feeling of almost like emo kid masochism about it that
Mm-hmm.
at least at the time I very much related to, that it's just kind of always in the back of my mind, this almost feeling that like whenever something is like almost too good,
Mm-hmm.
almost anxiety about it because I do have anxiety, so I do like when things just feel too good, I almost just get anxious, like waiting for the other shoe to drop, that like you can't even enjoy something being perfect because you
Like
just,
anticipating it ending, or
yeah, like you just feel
okay.
like perfection can be perfect hell. It's so good that I know something bad has to happen, but also that just almost that fear of self-sabotage, that you're so comfortable being miserable that you can't like
Mm-hmm.
recognize that something good is happening, that like you almost self-sabotage because that like misery is very comfortable. Like that's always just something I related to. And I have a theory. I'm gonna drop my hot take that
Yeah,
that lyric
please
is
do.
a callback to an unreleased something corporate song from the Galaxy Sessions, Caldecott Tunnel. Are you familiar with that song at all?
I've heard it, but I'm not that familiar, to be honest.
Okay, so here's my hot take, and I'll even tell you why I think this. There's a line in Caldecott Tunnel that is perfection ain't perfect, believer will find. And it has that like same vibe of like
Mm-hmm.
something's perfect, you just feel like you need to blow it up. You
Mm-hmm.
kind of want to see what's next, or you just kind of feel like the other shoe's gonna drop and you just like you just can't be happy with it. And I do think that he was connecting those two songs because he started playing Caldecott Tunnel with something corporate right before he left for Jack's Mannequin.
Oh, did not know that.
So I went to see something corporate my freshman year in college, and he played Caldecott Tunnel. And I didn't remember this little speech, but I have since seen other people like on YouTube who
Mm-hmm.
people that recorded in that like series that he was kind of playing this song. He did like a college
Mm-hmm.
tour, and
Okay.
people from other colleges had recorded clips of this song. So I have heard the little speech that he was giving me for it. And he said, like, sometimes, like, when you're writing songs, like a song that you wrote a long time ago becomes relevant again, almost more so and in a different way than when you
Mm-hmm.
actually wrote it. And then he plays Caldecott Tunnel. And in retrospect, he was probably writing everything in transit
He
around
was
that
that
time.
year.
So I actually
Yep.
do think like those songs kind of might be like a little bit sister songs.
An intersection at the very least
And
of thought.
yeah, at least like, and I think it's those lines that kind of
Mm-hmm.
intersect. And I know that when I was an emo kid at the time, both of those quotes made their way into like my aim away messages and stuff. The
Mm-hmm.
perfection ain't perfect, and sometimes perfection can be perfect hell. So it's an interesting connection, and I think the perfection can be perfect hell is just a very interesting lyric.
Well, I love that hot take. I mean, I wouldn't have made that connection because again, I'm not familiar with that song. I've heard it a handful of times. With that same line in mind, I love the way he sings it, and I love the wordplay in that line. It can be perfect hell, perfect well, and then he goes into the chorus there. Hours pass, and she still counts the minutes. This song is one of those that I see. You know, Andrew has many different types of songs that he writes, as all artists do. He has storytelling songs where he's telling about a moment in his life, and he has like more storytelling where he, about his life that's overall themes and a little bit more vague. And then he has, not as autobiographical songs where he's telling stories about characters. This is definitely like moment in time storytelling. Like these were moments, in my opinion. But actually, it sounds like you had a different opinion. You have a different opinion, which it didn't really occur to me at the top of the episode. You talked about how you felt like this is more of like metaphors for transitioning from one thing to another, which sounds very relevant to this point in his life. But I always took this song so literally. So it was interesting for me to hear you say that because like I look at these lyrics and I'm thinking, oh, okay, because Kelly and him spent some time with their family and they got on a plane and he was, waiting, anticipating getting home and this uncomfortable conversation they would have. But since you've said that, I can look at these lyrics and interpret them in a completely different way too at times. You mentioned feeling out of control, being on a plane because you're completely at the mercy of the pilot and the other staff on that plane and the staff even back at the airports that are kind of managing that plane's flight. And those are things that I never really thought of, that kind of out of control feeling that may be presented in the song and the transitioning from one thing to another, not necessarily like a place like paradise to home, but something corporate to Jack's Mannequin or being in a band to going out on your own, or being in a relationship to going out on your own in this case as well. Something that I pick up in this song is, and don't fly fast. Oh, pilot, can you help me? Can you make this last? This plane is all I got, so keep it steady now, because every inch you see is bruised. Obviously, the main part of the chorus, I interpret this as he's talking to the pilot in his head. Again, kind of a very literal situation. I've always had this visual of him sitting on a plane, and maybe kind of like me, I'm projecting. He has his headphones on or earbuds in, and he's just, listening to music, kind of zoning out by himself. But he's talking to the pilot in his head like, I really want this flight to last forever, because when we get there, I'm going to have the most uncomfortable conversation of my life, and I don't want to do that. I don't want to have this conversation, and if this flight just lasts forever, I never have to have it. That I can completely relate to, independently of the other ways I could relate to this, in a sense, because still to this day, I can feel that way. That anticipation of a conversation with either your significant other or your coworker or a friend or just somebody that you have to have a conversation with. It has to happen, but it's going to be very uncomfortable when it does. So I just imagine this guy like, oh, I don't even want this flight to be over, because then I have to deal with this right now. Is that what you hear, or do you have a different interpretation?
Basically, yeah, interpret it the same way that you do. That, like, even though being on a plane is kind of crappy, and he's
kind of uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's uncomfortable. He's talking about, the babies are crying, and he's got nothing to do but, like, yeah, listen to his music, walk the aisle. It's this, like, it's not the most fun thing that anyone does, but he's saying, like, don't fly fast. This plane is all I got, because yeah, he's gonna land, and he doesn't know what's going to happen when he lands, but he knows that he can't just continue to pretend that nothing's going to change. He's made this decision to break up with Kelly, to move on from something corporate, both, whatever whatever it is. And even though being on the plane is not a pleasant situation, it's delaying what's going to happen when he lands. And to him, that like time in between whatever he's coming from and whatever he's going to, it's more comfortable than this, like, unknown and whatever it is that's going to happen next. And so he's just saying, hey, I don't like being on this plane, but that's all I got right now, and I don't know what's going to happen when I land, so I'd rather just stay up here.
In addition to that, I enjoy music that references music sometimes, if that makes sense. He mentions listening to the in-flight radio, but specifically, now every word of every song I ever heard that made me want to stay is what's playing through the in-flight radio. I love that reference, because he's listening to the songs just like we do as fans, as consumers of music. He's the same. He likes music. He listens to music of other artists, and it speaks to him. The lyrics speak to him, and sometimes they give him the message that he needs in the moment. And I thought that was kind of a pretty neat reference there.
Yeah, I love that too, because that is really relatable to me. When you just feel like the universe is kind of like giving you signs about something, and you're just trying to forget about something, and then all of a sudden it just seems, the songs that remind you of a person or of a time or of a mindset just kind of randomly start playing. It can almost feel like very targeted.
Yeah.
The universe is trying to tell you something.
We also can't talk about the lyrics in the song without talking about the bridge. When he sings, so read your books, but stay out late some nights, and don't think that you can't stop by the bar. You haven't shown your face here since the bad news. Well, I'm here till close with fingers crossed each night, 'cause your place isn't far, and hours pass and hours pass. That is a cool part in concert, but it's also the beginning of that bridge. So read your books, but stay out late some nights. I've seen that in Andrew fan artwork. Like, I've seen tattoos and I've seen visual art with that on it. I feel like that's a popular lyric.
It's funny that you say that, because I actually bought like a visual
Hmm.
artwork that says that, intending to
Oh,
get it framed to hang in my office. I just haven't gotten it framed yet.
oh, that's
Because
cool.
that's another lyric that I just feel like kind of has been relevant to me over time, just for different reasons. And even though I don't think this is what he was writing it about, for me, it's just like a fun lyric that reminds me of balance. And
Hmm.
especially right now with writing a dissertation and all
Oh
of that,
yeah,
just
I bet.
I wanted to get that frame to put in my office just to remind me, like, yeah, read your books, like, take your studies seriously, but don't forget to have fun.
You're right.
I mean, that is literally what he's saying.
Yeah.
But I really like that lyric. And it's actually funny that you brought that up and we were talking about like breakups and times in your life, because a little aside personal story related to the bridge. When I came back from London, I went, back to college, and I turned 21 the next semester, and I started dating a bartender.
Hmm.
We broke up, a few months later, and my apartment was just down the road from the bar that he worked at. It felt like a life imitating art time, because like
Hmm.
he was not like a Jack's Mannequin fan. But once he literally said those words to me, I remember, and I'm like,
Oh
I'm
wow.
living, and I didn't even think about this until like you just brought up that bridge. I don't still relate it to this. Obviously.
Hopefully, I didn't just ruin the song
No,
for you.
you did it. You did it. You did it. It was just funny because I feel like he had literally said that to me at one point, that like you can still come by the bar, and I know you're really busy in school, but like you can still come have a little fun. Like it'd be great to see you, kind of thing.
Hmm.
But anyway, going back to what I think Andrew was probably talking about, like that bridge almost feels like after the rest of the song, in addition,
Yep.
like a PS, like he's not on the plane anymore.
Yeah.
And
We're back in the real world and we're in
yeah,
reality.
yeah, like he's off the plane, and now him and Kelly are broken up.
Hmm.
And I like kind of picture like they probably had a bar that they used to like to go hang out in that she stopped going to because she probably figured he was there. And he's just kind of missing her. And I do think that she was in school when they broke up. I think she was in college.
I do think so too. Because I think he's referenced that in maybe a live stream or something where when he was out on tour and missing her when they were broken up, she was back home in school. I think you're right.
Yeah, so I think what he had probably written it about was kind of missing her and being like,
Hmm.
I want you to study hard. You got to do what you got to do, but I miss
Hmm.
you. I'd love to see you. And knowing that they got back together later on, maybe it worked. Maybe she came by. I don't know exactly how they got back together, but maybe she did come by the bar and they rekindled things.
Yeah.
But yeah, that bridge kind of feels like a PS to the song, that he kind of wrote it after the storytelling he was doing on the plane.
I completely agree. And now that you've said all that, I take that last line and hours pass, and it kind of like fades. Yeah, yeah. He's waiting for her, but maybe she didn't show up.
Ooh, I never thought about that. Yeah, that's
I never did either until I'm staring at the words on the page, which I usually
yeah,
don't
I
do with
like that.
lyrics, obviously, but this kind of gives me the unique opportunity to do so.
I like that. Like he was talking about hours passing on the plane, and now on the bridge,
Hmm.
he's talking about hours passing when he's sitting at the bar, hoping she's going
Yeah.
to show up, and then she doesn't.
I didn't have a real clear interpretation of that, but I like what you said because when you said it feels like a PS, it feels like an after the song. Yeah, I completely see that too. That's when I thought about the hours pass, which I never really put any thought into before. Do you have a favorite part of the song, lyrically or otherwise?
Hmm. I really do think I like that bridge because I like the
Hmm.
build to it, and then kind of just like the high energy of it. Especially, like I said, it translates really well live. It's kind of a fun part live. He gets up at the piano and gets
Hmm.
up off the piano, kind of stands up and waves his arms around. So I would say probably the bridge. And I do really like that read your books would stay up late
Yeah, sounds like it's pretty important to you.
Yeah, I got it framed to put in my office. So
Yeah.
for me, it kind of just reminds me of balance. And so
hmm
I would say probably the bridge and like the build to the bridge, kind of like that
hmm
crescendo tempo change.
out of the second chorus there. I love the first verse. That's it for
Mm,
me. There's a lot I like about this song, but that first verse just feels very powerful to me. And it's not only the lyrics, but the whole intro and how he sings that first verse. I really like the way it leads in all the way up to, especially, and this is probably like the climax of the song for me, just one more plane ride and it's done. It just feels very important. And that's pretty much the beginning of the song, but I just feel like that kind of that whole intro and then leading into the whole song. Just one more plane ride and it's done. Just feels very powerful. Have you heard the Punk Goes Acoustic version of this song? So it was featured on Punk Goes Acoustic Volume 2.
yes. Steve, I love the Poco's acoustic series.
Yeah,
Yeah,
same.
you're speaking my language here.
Yeah.
In the words of Brand New, I am a sucker for anything acoustic. So,
hmm
yeah, so those, I think both of those came out when I was in college, I want to say, because I kind of connect them to, I want to say like the first one kind of came out, I think like my freshman year, and the second one, like maybe my junior year. And yeah, I was all about the punk goes acoustic. I am a pop punk girly,
hmm
but also just the acoustic version of anything is usually gonna blow me away. Like
Yeah.
I love acoustic versions of songs that aren't originally acoustic.
Same. That's what I was gonna say that. You took the words right out of my mouth. Yeah. The
Yeah.
the songs that you already know and love electric and then broken down acoustic, it's just next level.
Yeah. I do like a lot of like singer-songwriters that do a lot of like acoustic guitar, but I don't know, there's something about a song that is more of like a rock song that's not
hmm
an acoustic song and then an acoustic version of it. I do love the acoustic version of Bruised, like especially that build towards the bridge in the acoustic version where it's just like a
Yeah, it
lot
sounds
of
different.
piano, like he's
hmm
like there is that tempo increase, but there's like just a lot of like heavy piano that's just some beautiful piano playing.
To me, it feels more ballady, and I found it interesting that it's the acoustic version. But I was listening closely in headphones earlier today, and I've probably noticed this before, but it just kind of came to light for our conversation. There actually is an electric guitar in the background at times. You hear Bobby playing. It's not as defined as in the album version, but it's mostly acoustic. It's piano, it's acoustic, and there's a little bit of electric guitar balancing things out, but it's also very light. I love this version. I was listening to this today again, and if you remember what I said earlier, like it's like a song I've heard a lot in a lot of different contexts, and this being one of them from way back when, but I hadn't heard this version in a while. So I realized today that I didn't put the acoustic version on my All Andrew playlist. I've never put it on there.
Oh, you gotta.
Yeah, this isn't one that comes up regularly, so it's like it kind of fell out of rotation for a long time. And I got to bring it back because when I heard it, I should put this on more often because I really love this version. And it kind of made the song fresh for me again. I don't think I like the acoustic version better. Maybe I do, maybe I don't. I don't know. But it just kind of kept it fresh, like, oh, there's this version of it that I hadn't heard in a while. Like when you hear a song live and you're like, oh, yeah, it kind of like reinvigorates the energy of the song somehow.
I realized I hadn't listened to any of the Punko's acoustic collections in a long time and
Mm-hmm.
had kind of forgotten about them. And I went back and listened to all of them. And I'm like, yeah, why aren't these songs on any playlist?
Yeah.
Like there's some really good songs on
Yeah.
both one and two. And then apparently I found on Spotify there was a three that came out like recently. I didn't even know that that had come out.
It was probably 10 years ago at this point, but yeah, a lot more recently than the first two.
I guess by recently, yeah, it was probably like
Yeah.
yeah, like 2015 or something. But like the first
Yeah.
two were like I don't know, like 2004 or 5 and then like
Yeah.
2007 or 8, I think. I had forgotten how much I love those. So yeah, you kind of helped me rediscover those.
Oh, cool.
I also listened to them on Spotify and was like, yeah, these albums are great.
There's so many good tracks on those comps that I need to go back and listen to them more often. I also, so speaking of other versions of Bruised though, I also found that there's someone online that removes lyrics from songs in the genre, and then they put them on YouTube as instrumentals. So there's actually an instrumental version of Bruised, as well as several other Andrew McMahon songs. So I'll post a link to that as well in the show notes. I think it's kind of cool. Like, I made a playlist of like 6 or 7 or 8 of the songs by Andrew McMahon, like Jack's Mannequin or Andrew McMahon in the Wilderness, of his songs with no lyrics in them. Just good background music.
Yeah, I like to listen to like music in the background if I'm writing or whatever it is, where like I don't really want to get distracted and like kind of
Right.
start like getting into
And
a
sing
song and
along.
singing
Yeah.
along. So
Yeah.
I think instrumental songs are really good for like background music when reading or writing or something.
Well, any final thoughts? Anything that we missed about the song Bruised or anything else?
I think we covered it pretty well.
I think we did too.
This was a fun conversation because I feel like we both were kind of seeing some new interpretations of it than we had kind of
Definitely.
come in here with. So
Yeah.
I think we both had like such different things that we were connecting, like from our own lives and different things that we were kind of pulling out of the song.
I'm glad you picked this song because, like you said, it gave me some new perspectives, and I picked some new things out of the lyrics that I didn't really notice before. And it's always interesting to hear someone else's perspective on a song that you've lived with for so long, that's been so special in your life. Like I said, kind of could be on my life soundtrack, so to speak. And to hear someone else's connection to it, it just gives me a whole new look at it. So I appreciate you coming on the show today. Thank you so much, Kristin.
Well, thank you so much for having me. This was a lot of fun.
I want to thank you again for the video you put together. I thought that was really special, and I'll be posting that in the show notes. Did you want to share your dog's Instagram? Is that public? Is that something that you share out or no?
Sure, yeah. My personal Instagram, I do keep private, but if people want to request me, that's fine too. You can
Mm-hmm.
post my personal Instagram. People just have to like
Mm-hmm.
request to follow me.
Yeah.
So that one's Kristin, Kristin 10185. And
Okay.
then my dog's Instagram, that is public. That is where I put most of my content.
Mm-hmm.
I post a lot more on that one. And that one it's Winston underscore the underscore Aussie underscore coonhound. My dog Winston, which was the first dog that we had rescued when I made the
Mm-hmm.
account, he's a mix of an Australian Shepherd and a coonhound. So Winston, the Aussie coonhound, is where I
Awesome.
put all my dog content. If any of your listeners are interested in seeing lots of pictures and videos of hound dogs.
I'm sure there will be some interest out there. I'll give them a follow too because I want to see what's going on with other dogs out on Instagram. So my dog does get some time out on Instagram, but on our personals. Well, thank you everybody who continues to listen to the show. Shoot me an email at somethinginthewilderness@gmail.com or DM me on Instagram. And like Kristin, you can join me for an episode to talk about a song that you feel special connection to. But also feel free to comment anytime on social media. I love seeing it, love seeing the interaction. Let us know what you think of the episode. And again, Kristin, thanks for joining us. Always good to hear another fan's perspective on a song. I've got my things. I'm good to go.